Just take a week off. Like, nobody cares. I've never had a YouTuber that I like take a week off from making videos and thought, what the hell? I'm 8-Bit Music Theory, and welcome to Game8 Connect. I was a gamer first, I think, and musician second, but it's pretty close. I loved playing games as a kid, and I also loved learning instruments and trying to play music and trying to figure out the music from games that I liked on the piano or whatever. And it wasn't until after I graduated music school, I started the channel as kind of a hobby because I loved watching analytical YouTube videos on, film theory or whatever it was. But there was never any analytical music type videos, or at least not any of the specific kind that I would have liked. And so in my spare time, I just kind of thought, if no one's going to make these, then I'll make some myself. And when thinking of a theme for the channel, like trying to think of, well, what kind of music should I analyze? I was big into video game music cover channels on YouTube. Smooth McGroove came to mind as like, this guy sings video game music and he has 1 million subscribers. Like, okay, there's clearly a community around video game music that people get passionate about. So I thought, well, that's probably a good theme to have. I was waffling between like, should I talk about Beatles music mostly or video game music mostly? And I said, oh, okay, I'll do video game music. And the channel blew up really fast compared to a lot of YouTube channels. So very, like, within a year, I kind of put my attempted music career to the side to focus on YouTube because it very quickly outpaced my drummer career. Oh, you know what it was? I got a book called Songwriting Secrets of the Beatles by Dominic Pedler. And this wasn't like, I was interested in music theory before this and going to jazz school and learning more complicated theory. I found that stuff super interesting. Got good grades in my theory classes and everything. But then that book was a really interesting approach to theory where it was not academic. It was a lot more descriptive of like, oh, these kinds of note choices make these kinds of sounds, instead of what I was getting in school, which was very technical and very like, okay, so if you put the 13th, the 5th above the 9th in this chord voice, and so having that kind of more laid back approach to it, and that was a huge influence on my approach to analysis, on my approach to my channel. Really is I just try and do that book, but for video game music. Yeah, it's one of those things where looking back, now that this is my job, looking back, I can remember moments like as a kid or whatever, trying to break down like why certain chords or notes feel a certain way. But it's not something that I ever really thought about too much until pretty late in the game. Well, there was a Tumblr blog. I don't know if it's still up, but whoever made it stopped updating it. When I was in university, I found it, and it was talking about video game music. Mostly, the thing that I thought was most interesting was it was posting transcription of video game music, like sheet music of whatever music they were posting about. And I thought that was interesting. And so I thought, oh, that'd be really fun, post stuff online as a blog. And that's kind of, I think, what put the idea in my head to like post music theory analysis type stuff. I hadn't thought of making it a video, but I never really got around to doing that. And I think I remember the first thing that I had thought, the first kind of post that I had considered making was about the Sonic soundtrack, Sonic 1 soundtrack. And so I transcribed all the music from Sonic 1. And I think that was the first like video game soundtrack that I transcribed like for the purposes of analysis. Very deliberately, and not like trying to figure it out on piano or whatever. And so I like made sheet music of all these Sonic tunes, and then a couple years later, I just sat on them, never did anything with it. And then a couple years later, having the idea to do this YouTube channel. One of the first videos I did was on the Sonic 1 soundtrack, so all that stuff did get used finally. But of course, like, Zelda music is my favorite. That's my number one. The first video I ever put out was about the Zelda overworld themes. Zelda music's a huge inspiration, so I definitely was super into talking about that. Mario music too. So I think the first 3 videos I put out were on Zelda and Mario and Sonic. Kind of the big heavy hitters of video game music, of retro game music at least. My ultimate goal as 8-Bit Music Theory, as this persona, is first of all, to get people excited about music, to make people understand why this music is worthy of being passionate about, to give people an understanding of how, not just how hard it is to write a soundtrack and how much work goes into it, but how much creative inspiration goes into it. Like how much of a genius a lot of these big figures in video game music are. There's a great quote from Paul McCartney. Talks about being exposed to Mozart and really listening to the music and understanding, oh, he was just doing what we're doing. Like having this conception of like classical music, that's serious, and then we're like a pop band, rock band, whatever. What we're doing is silly. But then when he talks about having this moment of realizing like, oh, it's all music. There's nothing. Mozart was just writing in the style of the time, and we're writing in the style of the time. Not really this class divide. And I think the same way about like Koji Kondo is one of the greatest composers who ever lived. Certainly one of the greatest living composers. And his name should be up there, be mentioned along with all these canon of great composers. So I want people to have a more clear understanding of that. I want people to be passionate about music and to take music seriously. And I also want to fight the prevailing notion among kind of amateur and intermediate level musicians that it's not good to get technical about the music. Like I've met a lot of people, especially in the kind of rock band, garage band world, who will say things like, well, I don't want to learn music theory and like kill my inspiration, kill my creative spark. It's like, I get the concern because there's a type of musician who starts learning music theory rules and then stops making creative choices. But if you think that way, you just need to be exposed to better musicians, I think. People who like know the technical side of it and use it. You cannot play well without understanding how music works, without understanding your instrument. And there's a divide because there's like music academia and they have very specific kind of terminology for things. And then there's actual musicians that make music. And a lot of them never went to music school, especially kind of the greats of the past, Jimi Hendrix and Joe Pass and people like that, who can play your ass off, but then we'll sit there and go, and this is what is that? D? Oh, it's a D minor. And so then people see that in interviews or whatever and say like, oh, he doesn't even know what a D minor is. This music must just be flowing out of his heart. Like he has to think about it to go, oh, that's a D minor, but his fingers know what shape and what note they're going for, and they know what sound it'll produce, and they know how that'll affect the music. They understand the music theory. They just are self-taught, so they don't know the right terminology for it. I hate this divide between musicians. It's like it's the exact opposite. The more you learn about your craft, the more creative you are, generally speaking. Yeah, you kind of play games with your ears open more. I feel like playing games is fun. That's what I do to relax. But also, it's hard to turn off the part of me that's like trying to find something interesting to say about it, you know, like trying to get ideas. And so actually, a lot of times now, if I'm actually trying to just relax, I'll like turn off the music in the game or like play and listen to a podcast or something, which seems sacrilegious, but it almost feels like work having the music on when playing a game. But yeah, like thinking about music way more these last 7 years and thinking about how games use music. Growing up playing games, being a big gamer, I never really gave the music that much thought beyond like, oh, this tune is nice, you know? But after making so many videos and thinking about how music is used in different ways, I feel like I have a deeper appreciation for it. And I feel like I'm able to get excited or get interested in things that I wouldn't have noticed before. Of like, oh, that's interesting that they implemented the music this way, that they chose this kind of music for this part of the game, or noticing like, oh, these instruments fade in or fade out when you are doing X or Y in the game. Like I pay a lot more attention to what's going on musically when I play with music on, and then I also play without the music on a lot more to turn off that part of my brain. It's really hard, yeah. It takes a long time, but I like to do it. I like to transcribe and beat my head against the wall, going, "What is that note? What are the cellos doing in this one note of this bar?" It takes a long time, so I get why no one would want to do it. But that's kind of why I started doing the channel. Is for fun. I like to transcribe the music, and then the channel is almost more of a means of putting that out there. Like for me, the transcription is the fun part of making the video, and then I had like the work of it is like, okay, so how do I explain this in a way that anyone else would want to hear about it? And then have you record it and everything. But yeah, it takes a lot of practice to be able to do that with any kind of speed. Okay, I like this question a lot. The Chrono Trigger soundtrack, it seems like one of those soundtracks that you have to know as a game music nerd because of its very specific style. I'm trying not to get technical, but he uses these certain types of chord voicings, fourth-based voicings, in a way that's totally, I'm not going to say unique because it's a super influential soundtrack, but I think at the time, super unique, a very cool modern sound. And so it's like, if you're going to be writing music in the 2020s, you gotta know about that soundtrack. Okay, so that's like a musical vocabulary. And then you need one, I'm gonna say Snipper Clips, if you remember that game for Switch. The soundtrack is super fun and goofy and super melodic. If you want to write a good, strong melody, just listen to Snipper Clips all day and then see what comes out. Because the composer Callum Bowen has this way of writing melodies that seem obvious, where it's like almost nursery rhyme level simplicity, but they're just perfect. Like, I don't know what it is, something about them where you can hear it once and remember it for the rest of your life, and it just feels good to listen to or sing along to. So that's a great one for melody purposes. For orchestration, what would a good orchestration pick be? Oh, okay, I have two. The Final Fantasy 13 soundtrack has these really great orchestral textures. Very beautiful soundtrack. Masashi Hamauzu is the composer. And also the Link's Awakening Switch remake has a great soundtrack for... All the music was remade, scored for these little chamber ensembles of like wind quintet or string quartet, and those kinds of instruments mixed and matched in a way that was super interesting. I love that soundtrack. And then I'm going to say Final Fantasy VI, you gotta know that soundtrack for the motivic development. Or Undertale. Undertale's a good example too, of like, how do themes, musical themes, evolve and get developed over the course of a game soundtrack. So that's an interesting topic. And those games both do it super well. You know, music, like, if you think about like classical music, serious music, a big part of the enjoyment of listening to that stuff is hearing a theme and then hearing how it develops from the beginning to the end of the theme. And video games are interesting because they will do the same thing over the course of the game. Like, one piece won't develop a theme in a grand classical way, but if you play through the whole game, these themes will come up again and again and again in different permutations and develop that way. So that's another part of writing a game soundtrack that is important, or interesting at least. My biggest obstacle for making stuff was not knowing how to do any of it. Like, when I so my first video I ever made, I put together in Windows Movie Maker, and I, to be able to circle or point out different parts of the sheet music that I was using, I would put it into MS Paint and then draw a crappy red arrow with the MS Paint like pencil tool. So it was very, very low production value, but I didn't know how to make videos at all. I was totally just learning on the fly. And it's kind of funny because I think that's the best way to learn how to do something, is to just use whatever crappy tools you have to make however crappy of a version you need to make. Because I made, after like making like 15 videos like that, I started to think it would be really nice if my video editor could do X and Y. Like, I started to run into problems that I couldn't do what I wanted to do with Windows Movie Maker. And then I started looking at different video editing software, and it wasn't intimidating. Whereas if you're like, I want to start editing videos, start from zero, let me look at video editing software, it's super intimidating. There's too many options and you don't know what to look for. But in my case, I was looking very specifically, like, I want to be able to do X. Can I do X using this software? Yes. Okay, then I'll use that. And so I really built up my video creation skills one by one from the ground up just by doing it. And that is how I would recommend anybody learn a new skill. I think a lot about trying to make the very technical music theory stuff accessible. From what I've gathered in 7 years of doing this, the thing that makes music interesting is the emotional effect of it. So if you are breaking down a piece of music, even if you're using really technical language, or you're really getting into the weeds of it, and that's why it feels such and such a way. Anybody can listen to music and understand how it feels, especially game music is very deliberately written to evoke certain feelings. Like, all video game music is written for a specific purpose because it's trying to serve the game in some way. Video game music like that, it's a really good topic to base your analysis in, because you can always think, okay, well, why would they write a tune this way for a snow level or whatever it is? And so just coming back to that, like not losing sight of that. It's easy to lose sight of it and just get into like, oh, and they put a fourth in this chord, whoa. But if you can kind of keep it grounded in like, and so that's why it makes you feel X and Y way, then it is still approachable. Then it's still understandable. That's a good question. I would love to know that. I've gotten a lot of positive feedback on this Chrono Trigger video I did a long time ago. I think it was in the first year of videos that I made. And I made a point to go into how the soundtrack was written in a way, like there's a way that he uses chords where he'll shift between chords that, like he'll pick two chords that don't fit together well and switch back and forth between them, and then write a melody in such a way that it will be able to float over top of both chords. And so I remember I like took one of his tunes and took out the melody and then put in the melody to All Star by Smash Mouth over top of the Chrono Trigger chords to show like how the melody, how it's like a simple melody and it's just placed perfectly to fit over top of these chords. I think doing stuff like that helps a lot. Or like whenever I can, I try to give an example of the opposite of what I'm talking about. Instead of just saying, oh, the rhythm of this melody makes it feel so bouncy and fun. And then moving on, I'll say, oh, the rhythm of this melody makes it feel bouncy and fun. How would it sound if you changed the rhythm of the melody? And then I'll try and like play a version where the melody is not bouncy and fun. And you can feel the exact difference. You can feel exactly what the rhythm does to the music by having kind of these A and B examples. So I think videos where I can do that do better, or people get them more, or better explained. I can't always do that. I don't always think to do that. I don't think it's a big problem. Yeah, there's definitely a balance of you can't just be trying to make the most money possible, because that's going to put you down like a certain path that I personally am not interested in going down. So for me, I found this balance of putting out 2 videos a month is like enough. It's not too much work. I'm not killing myself, and it is making enough money that I can like survive and feed my family and stuff. So that's perfect. Lately, in the last year or two, I've been experimenting with kind of batch cooking, where I work really hard and really push myself for like 2 months, and then I take a month kind of off, or a month to like work on other projects. That's been working well for me. I think like if you work for yourself in any capacity, you have to do the work of experimenting and figuring out how you work best. But yeah, I don't know. I always find it kind of silly when YouTubers complain about burnout. Just take a week off. Like nobody cares. If you ever see anyone post like, sorry, I have to take a week off, I'm just feeling burnt out, all of the comments are super positive, always, 100% of the time. So I was like, oh yeah, do whatever you need to do, man. I think people need to just relax a bit and be okay with making less money if it means they're happier and not stressed all the time. Like, just, take it easy. Yeah, it's very different. The game music world has so many passionate people. Like there are lots of different games that have a huge passionate following for their music specifically. So I've done tons of videos on soundtracks that I like didn't know before making the video. Actually, Final Fantasy VI was one where I'd never played the game, never really checked out the music, and I just knew like, oh, people talk about Dancing Mad. Like that's a song that people talk about. So I started transcribing some Final Fantasy VI music and just got totally sucked in. Like usually what I'll do is just listen to the soundtrack or like search around on forums and on YouTube to see like what tunes from the soundtrack are the most popular, what get the most views, and not in like a cynical way. I'm a big believer in the objectivity of art, actually. So I'm like, if this tune got super popular, it's because there's something great about it. And so then it's like my challenge of like, can I figure out what is so gripping about this? Why is this one the one that got popular? And it's fun to do that, like to come into a soundtrack that you don't know at all and have no kind of bias towards, like something that I played, like the Wind Waker, a game that I've played a million times that I love. I have like moments tied to different parts of the game that where it's like the first tunes that I think of are tied to great moments in the game. But if you're just listening to the soundtrack without even playing the game, then it's totally on the music, it's without any other context. So yeah, I find that interesting. A lot of these soundtracks are like 4 hours long, so I hunt around to like, what tunes should I focus on, what should I listen to first? I'll listen to a few things and try and get a feel for like, okay, what's the soundtrack doing, what's interesting about it, what could I talk about? And then when I get kind of an idea of a direction, of, oh, I'm going to talk about the orchestration, or oh, I'm going to talk about the cool, crazy harmony, or whatever. Then you can start picking around tunes based on that try and fit your theme. And then from then on, it's kind of like making any other video. Yeah, that's always a fun thing. Hunt for what makes the soundtrack popular or what makes it special. The jobs that you can have online as whatever, a YouTuber or any kind of online social media job is going to be so specific and so niche, because that's what people use the internet for like watching stuff that is very specific to their niche interest, like video game music theory, for example. And so you're not going to be able to learn how to do this. Like, you're not going to be able to go to school to be a video game music theory YouTuber, but you have all the tools you need to make stuff. If you have a smartphone, you have more than enough tools to make stuff and put it online. And the content of what you put out is what matters. People don't really care about production values, but if you don't have an idea at the heart of it that is interesting, it's not going to matter. All the style in the world is not going to make a difference. So my advice is to just start making stuff. Make 20 videos, and over the course of making those 20 videos, you will teach yourself how to do it well, and you will also find out what parts of the process you hate doing and what parts you like doing, and you can change your course so you're doing more of what you like and less of what you hate, and you'll gradually veer down the path that's perfect for you personally. But it really is, you really just have to start doing it. It's annoying to hear. As someone who hates starting doing stuff and wants to like read about the perfect way to do it before you start, like, that's totally my personality, but I totally was proven wrong over the course of doing this YouTube stuff, starting the channel. It's like, oh yeah, you really do just have to start making it and throwing it out there and seeing what happens. So that's my advice. Check out my YouTube channel, 8-Bit Music Theory. Put out couple videos every month. I just put out one on the Piranha Plants on Parade song from Super Mario Bros. Wonder, which is super fun, so you can check that out. And I have my album of video game rearrangements called Let's Play by 8-Bit and the Single Players. That's on Spotify and Apple Music and all those streaming sites. You can check that out too if you're interested. And check out patreon.com/8-Bit Music Theory if you want to support what I do. This has been Game8 Connect. Thanks so much for watching.